Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS, and today we're talking about the penultimate installment in Big Finish's Rutans vs Sontarans series, Grave Moon. Previously we've talked about Betrayal at the House of Sontar, starring the Fugitive Doctor, and Rendition, starring the 2nd and 8th Doctor. Now the 8th Doctor is seemingly the underlying thread throughout most of these stories, with Paul McGann also appearing in Grave Moon, and is featuring in the final installment of Rutans vs Sontarans, Peace at Last. Now, Grave Moon is penned by Lizzie Hopley, who also wrote the previous Sontarans vs Rutans, The Battle of Giant's Causeway, which also featured the 8th Doctor. And out of the 4 Sontarans vs Rutans stories, The Battle of Giant's Causeway was admittedly my least favourite of the 4. However, I think Lizzie Hopley is a terrific writer, so I went into Grave Moon with pretty high expectations. And I love the pairing, of course, of the 6th Doctor and Peri. Despite many fans regarding Peri to be the definitive companion of the 6th Doctor, there haven't actually been that many 6th Doctor and Peri audios in the past couple of years, at least as long as I've been covering Big Finish. There are a few, and I always appreciate them when we get them, but, it just seems that this is like a nice little reunion that we don't seem to get as much as we used to. And of course, the 6th Doctor and Peri have already encountered Sontarans before, but here they're meeting the Rutans. On the moon of Amnex Pax, the 6th Doctor and Peri are tracking a criminal imposter to this moon sanctuary, which is made up of farms which have healing ponds within them. The moon of Amnex Pax is known galaxy-wide for its healing remedies and its unorthodox treatments, but the 6th Doctor and Peri have landed here while tourism is not as high as it used to be. The ponds have kind of declined over the past few years. And also on this moon is the 8th Doctor, played by Paul McGann, who is undercover on one of these farms as Farmer John. And Farmer John's neighbour, the neighbouring farm, is run by Uland, played by Rachel Babbage. Now this story opens with the 8th Doctor and Uland burying Uland's mentor and best friend, Yaren, played by John Banks. And he's played by John Banks because Yaren seemingly comes back from the dead. However, of course, this is a Rutan story. Yaren is not alive. It's just this Rutan that has taken the form of him. And Uland is more than willing to keep up with the deception because she just cares about Yaren that much. However, Sontarans and farm inspectors are circling the planet ready to strike, and the Rutan taking the form of Yaren is not just any Rutan, it is Melmoth, who we've seen in the previous Rutans vs Sontarans stories. This Rutan which has disconnected from the Rutan host and is using the healing ponds and is using his own unorthodox technology as a form of self-torture, effectively, to try and do whatever it takes to reconnect with the Rutan host.
Rutans don't go insane. Rutans always have a plan, the host's plan.
The host is gone!
What do you mean, gone?
This is what I am left with.
What?
Pathetic attempts to rejoin, flailing in the dark. Even if I succeeded, would it accept this? What I have become?
Rejoin? You're not part of the host. You've been separated. Oh, who did this to you? How did this happen?
I no longer remember. My way of thinking is destroyed.
Of course it is. A Rutan is the host. The host is the Rutan. It's like removing one of a Time Lord's hearts.
I have a heart.
This farmer you're impersonating has a heart. When you can successfully keep his form.
I have one in Oland. Their mind keeps me alive.
Grave Moon is a fine story, but I think the issue with Grave Moon is that it immediately follows Rendition. Not necessarily in the quality department, as I think both Tim Foley and Lizzie Hopley are great writers in and of themselves, but because Rendition and Grave Moon are dealing with very similar themes, and it's a bit disheartening that you could basically swap the order of these stories, or even just like remove one of them entirely, and it feels like you're not really losing anything thematically. The theme in Rendition of Melmoth and the other Rutans who have been disconnected from the host, who are trying to use the idea of war poetry and war trauma as a replacement for the hive mind that they've been disconnected to, that was a really profound one. But Grave Moon is doing basically the exact same thing, except it's the idea of love. It's the idea of Yaren's love which is being co-opted by this Rutan, and that is the replacement connection that this Rutan has. It's a fine theme, and I think that Rachel Babbage's performance really is like, she's the MVP performer trauma of this story, but it just feels like, oh, you've just done basically the exact same thing as Rendition, except whereas that was about war trauma and war poetry as a new form of connectivity, you've done love between farmers. That's not an invalid theme, I don't want to try and downplay it, but you've done the same thing 2 stories in a row. And maybe if Rendition was released after Grave Moon, I'd be saying the exact same thing, but I'm working with the release order that I've been given here. There are still some really nice character beats though. I think that the 8th Doctor is fitting really well in the role of like the chess player who's manipulating all the events in the background. It's normally a role that you'd associate with Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor, but Paul McGann does it really well here. But once again, it's just the exact same thing that he was doing in Rendition, including but not limited to a nice short but sweet reunion with a previous companion who he has a fondness for. I also think there's a really nice detail that the 6th Doctor and Peri, they acknowledge that they have met the Sontarans before, and more specifically the 6th Doctor tells Peri, oh yeah, myself and Jamie encountered them before, along with another friend, because of course the 6th Doctor and Peri already met the 2nd Doctor and Jamie in the 2 Doctors alongside the Sontarans. Like, it's I know a lot of people will be like watching this review going, yeah, well, no shit, but those details can, believe it or not, get lost when you're trying to focus on, just telling a story, and Lizzie Hopley remembered that detail, and it definitely goes appreciated. However, while Peri does know who the Sontarans are, and she's heard about the Rutans, this is the first time she's ever encountered a Rutan, as far as I'm concerned, at least definitely when it comes to Big Finish, and she never encountered them in the TV series. I don't understand why Peri is so violently hostile to the Rutans. I feel like maybe there's a character motivation or a character beat that wasn't quite expanded upon here. When listening to Grave Moon, I got the sense that this story would have worked really well as a classically formatted 4-parter, like 4 20 to 25 minute episodes, as opposed to the 50 to 55 minutes that we get for Grave Moon. It does feel like, with the cast of characters, with the themes that it's playing with, and also just the pacing and the cause and effect structure of Grave Moon, it's really hurtling towards a conclusion, whereas I really think it could have taken, it could have really taken its time, especially when it comes to the theme and the connection of Yaren and Uland, and it kind of feels like they're really speed running that connection, because Melmoth, the Rutan, when he takes the form of Yaren, hardly has any interaction in this story with Uland, but we're meant to buy that this is like the love that's holding him together as a being, but they don't spend any time with each other apart from near the end when everything starts falling apart. If this had been a classically edited 4-part story, you really could have taken your time with that love story. You really could have taken your time and paced yourself with that relationship and really earned the ending that Grave Moon is going for, but unfortunately it's 50-55 minutes long. You've also got to get the 8th Doctor in there, as well as the Sontarans, and you've got to world build this Moon of Amnex Pax and the inciting incident. It actually takes quite a while for the 6th Doctor and Peri to encounter the Rutan, because there's so much setting up as to why they're on this moon in the first place. They're tracking a criminal imposter, so I don't know if you needed that much legwork to get them to meet the Rutan in the first place. It kind of felt like they overthought the inciting incident here. I don't want you to go away from this review thinking I didn't enjoy Grave Moon or that Grave Moon is a poor story, but it does feel like it's a heavily compromised story. It's compromised in its structure, it's compromised in the fact that it also has to include the 8th Doctor here as well, so that's taking up a lot of essential screen time. I think that Abby Harris, who plays Melmoth, is doing a really terrific vocal performance, really selling the anguish and the desperation of this lone Rutan who's just trying more than anything just to restore the status quo that it once had. This tragedy story that was basically started by the Doctor centuries ago. I think that Abby Harris is really doing a great job here, but it's kind of underserved by a plot, a story that is just in a massive rush to get where it needs to go. And as a result, it takes a lot of shortcuts and is a lesser story as a result of it, which is a shame. Like I said, maybe if Rendition was released after Grave Moon, I would have given that story a similar review or a similar analysis, but I'm just working with the release schedule that we're given. The final installment, Peace at Last, written by Tim Foley, is a 8th Doctor, Charlie and Kerez story, so we'll see how that goes. I love how Conrad Westmus's role as Kerez, like a long-time companion in the Big Finish early days of the 8th Doctor, is now just relegated to Sontaran and Rutan stories here. But anyway, that's my review of Doctor Who Rutans vs Sontaran's Grave Moon. I want to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hype the video, subscribe for more Doctor Who Big Finish reviews, and folks, I'll see you all next time.